Arthur was a tyrant king who ruled the world with an iron fist. During his rise to the throne, he killed his enemies, bombed cities, and committed countless atrocities in the name of power. But one day, he began to reflect on all he had done, felt immense guilt, and then died of a heart attack. As he slowly fell into the abyss, he heard a voice promising him a second chance at life and urging him not to waste it this time. Moments later, Arthur opened his eyes to find two people looking at him. The man introduced himself as Reynold, and the woman as Alice, Arthur's parents. They didn't expect their baby to understand them, but they were overjoyed to have him. Arthur realized he had been reborn and was still shocked at being a baby, even though he acknowledged that his parents were taking good care of him. However, he didn't like being trapped in a baby's body, with a huge head, unable to speak, and peeing and pooping without control. Then he saw something even stranger when he noticed Reynold, channeling energy into his fist and smashing a huge rock. Arthur was astonished by this power he had never seen in his previous life as a world ruler. Reynold was proud of his feat, but didn't notice a rock falling onto his head. Alice, worried, intervened and healed him using magic, warning him not to show off again. Despite his theatrics, Reynold's fists were deadly. He could kill a wild boar with one strike during a hunt, making him valuable to his group. After the trip, Reynold returned to his family, but remembered his clothes were covered in boar blood, so he needed to clean himself first. Arthur learned two things. This world was dangerous and weapons were common for protection. To stay free, he needed to learn how to fight. When Alice returned and asked him to sleep, he didn't object, finally enjoying sleep after a life filled with fear of assassination. Months later, Arthur's limbs grew stronger, and he began to move. The first thing he did was crawl toward a mirror to examine himself. His parents thought it was cute, but he was trying to adapt to the idea of being a child. Since he could move, the next time Alice put him to sleep, he opened his eyes and began his plan. He threw the blanket off, climbed out of bed, and crawled across the floor while Alice was busy washing dishes. He reached the other side of the room without being noticed, opened the library door and pulled out a book to learn about this world. He discovered the continent was called Dicathan, divided into three kingdoms: the Kingdom of Darkness, where dwarves lived in massive caves; the Kingdom of Eleanor, home to elves in the forests; and the human Kingdom of Sapin, ruled by a king who didn't bomb cities to take them over, as Arthur once had. He kept reading and noticed that technology was underdeveloped due to the presence of magic. People could use magic by controlling the mana within their bodies. Though magic wasn't widespread, it played a big role in life here. Magic was used in two ways: augmentation, which involves circulating mana inside the body to gain strength, defense, and speed, and conjuring, which directed mana outward to manipulate elements. But he found nothing about the healing magic Alice used, so he assumed it was rare. It seemed most people awakened their powers at puberty, and through what was known as the mana core, they could control magic and become mages. Arthur understood this easily because in his past life he had used ki, which functioned like mana. He tried focusing his energy, and his mana core started forming inside him, a major breakthrough. But before continuing his training, Alice found her baby, hugged him tightly, relieved after discovering he had disappeared from his bed, and was grateful that he was unharmed. And once again, he pooped in his diaper and he says, When will I grow up and get rid of the humiliation I live in? After some time, Alice writes in her diary that her son is beautiful, kind, smart, and there is no one like him in the world. But the problem is that he hasn't laughed even once in the past 2 years. She stops writing when she hears Ray calling her happily, saying, Come see what Arthur, our son, is doing. She finds her son holding a stick, and his father is training him in the sword reversal technique. She explodes and says, Damn your mother! The boy is still learning to walk and you're doing this to him. Your day won't pass peacefully. Let's go. And after this lovely fight that Ray hears, Alice takes Arthur and goes to the market instead of leaving him with his crazy father. Arthur enjoys the market, seeing beautiful things, like weapons he wants to test to assess the state's military strength, and strange stones he's seeing for the first time in his life, not knowing what they're used for. Most importantly, he sees magic with his own eyes being used in their spells. And although things don't go as he wants, it's the first time he feels cared for. And he asks himself, is this what it means to have a family? He remembers glimpses of his past, and we learn he was an orphan raised in a shelter, so he doesn't know the simplest things about family. He answers himself that he doesn't know, because he's never experienced this feeling before, but he loves the warmth he feels now. When Alice puts him to sleep, she says she feels happy when she sees him reading books or trying to explore the world with his great curiosity. And surely, he inherited all this from his father, and he will definitely go on adventures just like him. But she wished for him a calmer life than his father's. The next day, we see Arthur standing and watching his father train, and he says he's lucky to have a living role model to learn from. But after all that waiting, Ray stomps the ground with his foot, and some stones and grass fly into the air, and when Ray looks at him proudly, Arthur thinks to himself, if he picked them up with his hands, it would have been easier and faster. But Alice comes and says, now your father will start real training. In moments, Ray gathers his energy with simple hand and foot movements, and the place shakes as Arthur watches in amazement, realizing that Ray is an enhancer. Impressed by what he saw, Arthur decides to apply it, and refuses to sleep because he wants to read books from the library. But Alice refuses because bedtime is non-negotiable. Yet Arthur uses the ultimate cuteness mode, and despite Alice's attempts to refuse, her heart can't resist her son's innocent look, and she gives in. As soon as she leaves the room, Arthur starts training, using all the knowledge he gained over the past years, gathering energy around his body and focusing it on one point to finally form his mana core. At that time, Alice was bringing juice to Ray, who was still training, to let him rest a bit, but suddenly, without warning, a massive explosion happens inside the house. Ray throws himself on Alice to protect her from the blast, and his back gets badly burned. He makes sure Alice is okay, but she doesn't care about herself. Her first thought is of Arthur, whom she left inside the house, and they both run quickly toward the house. Ray reaches first, but freezes in shock. Alice asks, what's wrong? And when she arrives, she sees half the house destroyed, and Arthur flying in the air completely unharmed after successfully forming his mana core. And he lands on his face with a look of victory because his effort finally paid off. But his joy doesn't last as the remaining part of the roof falls on him, and with his small body he can't escape. He says, after all this effort, I'll die because of my recklessness. But he's surprised to find Alice hugging him, and Ray removing the debris that was about to crush them and throwing it away. Arthur thinks that it's a parent's duty to protect their child, but he's shocked when he sees Alice's face covered in tears and looks at Ray, his father, who's also crying. And they say they should be proud because they did their job well, and there's no need to cry. But Arthur feels something strange he doesn't understand, something he's never read about before, and he too starts crying and calls out to his mom and dad for the first time. Arthur appears in his previous world, standing before a man accused of attempting to assassinate him, with a group of soldiers beside him sentencing the man and his family to exile in their former homeland. The accused confesses and says he's willing to face the consequences, but begs that his innocent family be spared, saying exile would be worse than death for them. He bows before Arthur and pleads desperately, but the judge arrogantly denies the request, calling it an insult to the king and not worth consideration. At that moment, Arthur shocks everyone by killing the man's wife and young son without hesitation. The accused realizes that the king has chosen to spare them from the suffering that awaited them, and thanks him. In the present, 4-year-old Arthur stands before Ray, who offers him gloves similar to his own. Arthur refuses and picks up a small sword instead, thinking that using gloves with his small body might kill him before he even reaches his opponent. The training begins with fierce attacks from Arthur, which Ray parries skillfully using a branch. Ray enhances the branch with mana, and Arthur does the same with his sword, attacking until he breaks the branch. Ray smiles and says, "What do you think?" Later, Alice and Ray discuss finding a trainer for Arthur. Alice refuses because they agreed that Ray would train him, and because they want Arthur to choose his future, especially since he's still only 4, and she doesn't want him away from her. Ray agrees, but insists that Arthur's talent exceeds anything they imagined, and he needs a suitable mentor. Alice offers to teach him some magic, but Ray cuts her off, reminding her that her role is different, and he's trying to ensure Arthur's talent isn't wasted. Alice ignores him, hugs her son, and says she won't let him go, accusing Ray of not loving his son and wanting to send him away. Ray replies, "Come on, would I have done all this if I didn't love him? Does that seem right to you?" After a brief argument, Arthur steps in and says, "Why don't you both come with me and give yourselves a break?" Their mood changes and they begin packing for the journey. The next day, Arthur introduces himself to a group of adventurers. One of them says they've met before, but Arthur probably doesn't remember because he was small. Arthur does remember. They were the Century team, which Ray and Alice were part of. The man introduces himself as Adam, and suddenly a girl hugs Arthur tightly from behind, saying her name is Angelia. Arthur thinks, "I'm going to suffocate. Let me breathe." Luckily, a man named All intervenes and pulls him free before Angelia chokes him to death. Arthur notices a girl standing alone on the wagon watching him closely. Then, a new character introduces herself as Helen, and the girl who was watching is named Jasmine. Once introductions are over, they prepare to set off. Arthur notes how primitive transportation in this world is compared to his old one, yet he still enjoys the journey. After some time, they decide to stop and eat. We learn they're heading to a city called Zeros, but the only only issue is the road isn't safe. They interrupt their rest when a pack of wolves attacks them savagely, but the wolves pose no real threat to the strong team of adventurers, especially with 3 augmenters, Helen, Adam, and Jasmine, and 2 mages, Angelica and Walker. At night, they gather for dinner. When Alice finishes eating, she notices a wound on Ray's hand and moves to treat it, but Helen tells her to wait. Within seconds, the team forms a circle around them and cautiously watches the surroundings. Once they feel safe, Alice begins treating Ray. It's revealed that her ability is different from regular magic, and because of how rare it is, she's in danger if anyone finds out. One of the reasons she and Ray live hidden far away. Afterward, Adam asks to train with Arthur before bed. Arthur stands opposite him, looking at the rest of the team watching with amusement, and says with surprise, "Shouldn't they be a little worried? Or have they forgotten I'm just a kid?" Adam cuts him off, asking if he's ready. Arthur replies that he is. Adam enhances his weapon and prepares to attack, and Arthur does the same, using mana to boost his legs and rushing at Adam with incredible speed. Adam is momentarily shocked, then braces himself, but is stunned when Arthur vanishes from sight and appears behind him. Luckily, Arthur slips, losing balance, and Angelica grabs him using a wind spell before he falls. The team shouts at Adam for taking things too seriously, but he replies that it's not his fault. Arthur is much stronger than he expected. He asks Ray what he did to make his son this powerful. Meanwhile, Arthur is visibly shocked when Jasmine suddenly appears next to him and asks how he moves so fast, then asks him to teach her. The team continues their journey peacefully, with Arthur spending his time dueling with Adam and Ray, learning archery from Helen, and spending time with Jasmine, who is clearly interested in him and learns from him how to enhance speed with mana. On Jasmine's birthday, she gives Arthur a dagger, surprising the entire team. They never imagined Jasmine, usually quiet, could be so open with someone she just met. Alice asks Arthur to prepare to continue the journey, but starts to feel tired. When Arthur asks, she tells him she's fine. On the road, they are ambushed by a group of bandits from both sides. The team goes on high alert. Angelica blocks a volley of arrows, and the bandit leader orders his men to kill the men and capture the women and children to sell. At the signal, the attack begins. Walker creates a stone wall to block the path, while Ray and the rest fend off anyone approaching the wagons. Despite the team's strength, the bandits are too many, and the group begins to tire, especially since they must protect Alice and Arthur. Ray is injured during a fight with the bandit leader. Alice runs to treat him, telling him the wound is minor, but he tells her to stay back, fearing her ability might be exposed. He then tells Arthur to take his mother and run. Arthur protests, claiming he's strong enough to fight, but Ray insists he use his strength to protect his mother because she's pregnant. Arthur is shocked, finally understanding Alice's strange behavior and fatigue. Ray continues, asking him to fulfill his duty as the older brother. A bandit shouts that there's no point in running. At Ray's signal, Arthur grabs Alice's hand and escapes. The bandits try to capture them, but Ray attacks with ferocity. 2 bandits block his path, but Adam and Jasmine defeat them. When another group appears, Helen eliminates them with her arrows. As Arthur and Alice flee, Arthur recalls the courtroom scene and thinks to himself that he never imagined someone like him, who had killed countless people, would now be trying to survive. Just then, he spots a bandit casting a spell and pushes Alice out of the way. The spell hits Arthur and throws him off the mountain. Before falling, he takes out the dagger Jasmine gave him and throws it at an enemy, falling alongside it. Walker and Angelica try to save him, but fail. Arthur falls as Alice screams his name. He remembers the accused man saying he finally understood his complaint, that his parents cried when they blew up the house, not because of guilt, but out of fear for his life, ready to sacrifice themselves to protect him. But he believes they'll cry again, because they won't see him anymore. Even though he didn't regret his decision, he wished he could have met the brother who hadn't been born yet. After a while, Arthur regains consciousness, finding himself on the ground in a forest surrounded by towering trees, his body covered in wounds. He looks around and asks himself where he is. Suddenly, the ground trembles beneath him, and something massive approaches. When he lifts his eyes, he freezes in terror as a giant creature stands before him and says, "Good morning, Arthur." After that, we see Arthur stands frozen before the massive beast, terrified, wondering what he could possibly do in such a dire situation. After a tense moment, he lunges at the beast in a desperate attack, but the creature simply touches him with the tip of its finger and knocks him down. To his surprise, Arthur gets back up unharmed. The beast tells him there's no need to fight because Arthur is far too weak in comparison, and instead, it wants to help. Before Arthur can react, the beast picks some fruit from nearby branches, places them in front of him, and tells him to eat, insisting even if he's not hungry, he must eat to recover from his injury. Arthur ignores this and asks about his family's fate. The beast replies that it will answer only after he eats. Left with no choice, Arthur complies. Once he finishes, the beast tells him he can't leave this place, but reassures him that his family is safe and left the forest days ago. Arthur cries from relief and thanks the beast, asking for its name. The beast reveals she is female, and her name is Sylvia. Days pass as Arthur recovers under Sylvia's care. Although eager to return to his family, she stops him, explaining they are now on the edge of the elven kingdom in the Shire Forest, a place crawling crawling with magical beasts and criminals where he'd be easy prey. There is still a way back, through a teleportation gate that Sylvia will prepare, though it will take time. In the meantime, Arthur trains and wonders about the scar on Sylvia's chest. Despite her appearance, she is kind and gentle. When Sylvia discovers Arthur has formed his mana core at such a young age, she teaches him how to gather mana while moving, something only magical beasts can usually do naturally. Arthur becomes fascinated because humans can only gather mana while meditating. Sylvia asks what he plans to do with such power and why he wants it. Arthur recalls the bandit attack and angrily declares he wants power to kill anyone who harms him or his family. Sylvia hits him, saying he failed the test and she won't teach someone who thinks like that. Arthur protests, arguing that their enemies kill without mercy, but Sylvia replies that his obsession with revenge is wrong. She places her hand on his head and tells him she could destroy him or gently touch him, asking which he prefers. He chooses not to be destroyed, and she tells him she doesn't want to hurt him either. She explains that anger and hatred cloud one's mind and lead only to violence, and she doesn't want him to waste his life, which she saved, on meaningless revenge. She asks again what he would do with power. This time, he says he'll use it to protect those he loves. Elsewhere, a being resembling Sylvia approaches their location. Meanwhile, Arthur reflects on his past life as King Grey, once respected and admired, yet a king in name only, while true power rested with the council. During a past encounter, a jealous councilman questions his motives, to which Arthur replied he was tired of being king. Back in the present, Arthur follows Sylvia's guidance in learning the new technique and eventually succeeds. Suddenly, Sylvia shoves him away and orders him to stay hidden and silent. The figure resembling Sylvia appears and demands she come with him without resistance. She refuses and immediately knocks him down. She reassures Arthur and rises, her black armor breaking away to reveal her true form, a white dragon. She attacks with full force, but the enemy counters and strikes back with a barrage of magical orbs. Sylvia freezes everything around her and calls Arthur out from hiding. He emerges, shocked, and she explains she used her power to stop time. She opens a teleportation gate and urges him to go through quickly. Though the gate doesn't lead directly to his home, she believes in his abilities and knows he'll be safe. Arthur stands speechless. Sylvia hands him a magical egg and a feather, instructing him to keep them together at all times. She then touches him with her head, causing strange patterns to appear on his body. When he asks what they are, she tells him he'll understand when the time is right, and she tells him to move quickly because there's no time, and reveals that she could have opened the teleportation gate at any moment, but she felt lonely and chose to delay it just to spend more time with him, asking for his forgiveness. Arthur cries and tells her he's not angry because she saved him from death, helped him, and cared for him all this time. He blames himself for being too weak to protect her and says he considers her part of his family, promising to enjoy his life as she asked. She replies with sorrow, asking how she could be part of his family when he already has a mother. He answers that, in that case, she should consider herself his grandmother. Sylvia cries with joy from Arthur's feelings and sorrow because they'll be separated in moments. She thanks him and pushes him through the teleportation gate. Arthur tries to stay with her, but he's already inside and teleported. As he leaves, time returns to normal, and Sylvia is hit by a powerful attack, falling to the ground. The enemy approaches her arrogantly, saying he didn't expect someone of her strength to fall so easily. Sylvia lifts her head and attacks him with the last of her power, causing a massive explosion. Meanwhile, Arthur is still traveling through the gate and hears Sylvia's voice saying goodbye. He says he knows what he must do, but he feels sad. Sylvia replies that the world is full of sadness, and that's why he must be the one to change it. Arthur protests, saying he can't do anything with his current strength, but Sylvia tells him that with time, he will fulfill her words, especially since he was the strongest king in his old world. Arthur freezes in shock, wondering if Sylvia knew his true identity all along. In her final words, Sylvia wishes that Arthur forgets his fate from his past life, lives happily, and enjoys his new life. After some time, Arthur wakes up crying and finds himself in a vast forest. Arthur stands in the forest after stepping out of the teleportation gate. Suddenly, he hears a scream and quickly runs toward the sound. When he arrives, he finds a group of humans restraining a young elven girl. One of them says they will make a lot of money by selling her. Their leader orders them to stop talking and leave the gloomy forest quickly. Arthur realizes they are slave traders, and he remembers the previous attack he suffered from bandits who intended to sell him too. Seeing how the traders mistreat the little girl fills him with anger, but he recalls Sylvia's advice to control his negative emotions. He calms himself and secretly observes the traders. When night falls and they decide to rest, Arthur tells himself he will continue to follow them until they reach the human city and rescue the girl. However, he worries they might harm her before selling her. He gathers his energy and prepares. When the slave traders begin getting ready to sleep, Arthur sees his opportunity to attack, but he is surprised to notice the magical beasts pulling the cart, controlled by magical collars. Arthur decides to use the situation. He throws some nuts at the beasts, making them agitated. Confused, one trader approaches approaches to calm them down. Just as he gets close, Arthur leaps from a tree and kills him with a magical energy strike. He takes his dagger. When the others notice his delay, one of them goes to check and freezes at the sight of the corpse. Arthur swiftly beheads him. Feeling exhausted from the effort, Arthur still attacks the remaining three without hesitation. During the fight, Arthur gets injured in his leg and falls, screaming in pain. Their leader warns that Arthur is a mage. The leader arrogantly appears and says they must protect the golden egg that fell into their hands, claiming Arthur will bring them far more money than the elven girl. He stabs his weapon into the ground and attacks using magical energy. Arthur dodges and counters, but the leader avoids the strike easily. Arthur throws the dagger, but the leader catches it and attacks. Just before being struck, Arthur ignites the leader's leg with magic. The leader screams in pain and throws Arthur away. As the leader prepares to kill him, Arthur quickly pulls the dagger's tied string and drives it into the leader's head. Arthur then goes to the last traitor, who begs for mercy, but Arthur kills him mercilessly. He frees the little girl and tells her she can return to her family. As they leave the cart, Arthur covers the corpses and tells her there are things a child shouldn't see. She replies that he is just a child like her and asks what happened to the criminals. Arthur answers that they had an accident and won't bother her again. He collects some supplies from the trader's belongings and says goodbye with salam. However, the girl grabs his hand, begging him not to leave her alone in the dangerous forest. Seeing her fear and innocence, Arthur decides to escort her home. He asks why she is so afraid when the forest should be safe for elves. She explains her people warned her about dangerous monsters that eat children. Arthur asks her where her home is and how long it will take to get there. She admits she got lost chasing a butterfly and doesn't remember the way. Before leaving, Arthur wonders whether to free or kill the magical beasts, but his thoughts are interrupted when the girl starts freeing them. He objects, fearing they might attack, but she explains that the beasts are innocent and were forced into obedience. At dawn, Arthur prepares food and asks the girl for her name. She tells him her name is Tessia. After tasting the food, she says it tastes very bad. Arthur replies that it's all they have and that they are lucky to have found any food in this forest. Tessia starts eating despite her objections because she finds no other solution. When she asks Arthur why he is in the forest, he tells her that he got separated from his family and was on his way back to them when he found her being kidnapped. She responds that she was lost too. After finishing their meal, they continue walking, and Arthur asks Tessia about life in the elven kingdom. She says it is enjoyable despite her parents being always busy, as her grandfather and the servants used to play with her. After a while, they rest, and Arthur notices a group of glowing butterflies surrounding Tessia. She explains that there are many of them in Eleanor, and they use them to light the roads. They continue their journey, and along the way, Tessia tells Arthur that once she awakens her magical power, she will start training with her private tutor. Arthur thinks that life in Eleanor must be wonderful if a girl like her has a private teacher. Arthur notices one of the beasts Tessia had released is following them. At night, they hear the beast's sound, and Arthur says it would have been easier if it had just killed them. He asks Tessia to go inside the tent while he stays outside to guard. Arthur looks at the egg he carries and wonders what Sylvia wants from him, but Tessia interrupts his thoughts, asking if he will sleep or not. He is surprised she is still awake, and she tells him her grandfather advised her not to sleep beside boys, but that she will keep it a secret. Arthur replies that he will stay awake to guard. Tessia enters the tent but quickly comes back out, telling him that staying outside will attract monsters since they would sense a child alone, so it's better if he guards from inside. Arthur realizes she is scared and cannot sleep, so he enters the tent and sits by the door. Tessia asks him not to move or leave without telling her, and Arthur has no choice but to obey. He stays seated until she falls asleep, then eventually falls asleep himself. The next day, they continue their journey. Over time, Tessia starts acting naturally and forgets about the slave traders, but Arthur remains anxious and wants to get her home quickly to return to his family. One day, Arthur feels a sharp pain in his mana core, and Tessia leaves to search for herbs that dry up mana. Arthur suffers greatly and cannot move, and a magical beast appears. Arthur comments that disasters never come alone. Tessia returns but says she found no herbs. Arthur asks her to stay put. They are surprised when the beast catches a small animal and leaves it for them before disappearing. At night, they sit and eat, and Tessia tells Arthur she couldn't find any pain-killing herbs, but found nutritious mushrooms that elven women usually eat. Arthur eats them without hesitation and suffers from indigestion. In the tent, Tessia tells him bedtime stories about the human and dwarf kingdoms. She says she wishes to visit them, but heard many bad things about humans, which is why elves don't trust them. Arthur is too tired to listen and falls asleep while she is talking, angering her. She also goes to sleep. The next day, they continue traveling, and Arthur looks clearly exhausted with his mana core pain, attacks getting worse and closer together. While walking, Tessia tells him she considers him her friend since they spent a lot of time together and that he is not as bad as other humans. Arthur answers indifferently, upsetting her. He apologizes, saying it is a great honor for him that Her Highness Princess Tessia considers him a friend. She gets even angrier and walks away, but then suddenly calls out, saying she saw something. Arthur sarcastically says he sees many trees and leaves, but he is shocked to find Tessia standing in front of a strange tree. Tessia enters the tree and asks him to follow, telling him they have finally arrived. Arthur opens his eyes to find himself on the ground surrounded by magic massive trees with strange buildings on them. Suddenly, a group of guards appears and arrests him. But who are these people and what do they want from Arthur? Could it be that Tessia has betrayed him? We'll find out in the next episode. Thanks for watching.